Hey, what's up, guys? LaRosa Johnson here, and want to welcome you to part two of Automation Made Easy for Solopreneurs. So, we're just going to jump right in and pick up right where we left off. All right, so like I said, this is part two of our 5-part series on making automation easy for solopreneurs. And so, just kind of give you a recap of what our plan of action is and what we're covering. So, last time in the first lesson, we covered like what is automation. So we were defining the terms, what it is, and why you need it in your business, because automation is such a broad term and a broad subject that we really wanted to dial it in and be specific in exactly what we were talking about, so that we can actually then have something that we are working from to then move forward. So today what we're doing is we're covering the P.I.E framework. And this is going to be the core framework for building automations for your business. This is something that I came up with after reading tons of books on automation and having people come up with like really complex workflows and stuff, and really wanting to find a simple way to do it, and really just looking at how I set up my own automations over the course of several years. So really just taking my expertise and dialing it down and distilling it into what is now the P.I.E framework, which is what we're discussing today. And then from there, what we're going to start doing is we're going to identify what you need to start automating in your business. So how to identify those things that you do want to automate. And then from there, we're going to start looking at the tools that you need for automation in part 4. And then finally in part 5, what we're going to do is start building a strategy for automating your business. So putting it all together and building something that's going to be repeatable to help you grow and scale your business to where you want it to be, so that you can have the income and growth that you desire. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk about before we even dive into the P.I.E framework is the wrong approach to automation. When I talk to people about automation, there is one common thing that I usually see that people have when it comes to setting automation. And not so much from the people that are like building it and doing it like on a regular basis, but from like business owners and others that I have worked with or have talked to in the past that have come to me wanting me to build something for them. And the approach is set it and forget it. And if I'm honest, that's the absolute worst thing that you can do for your business. And it's a surefire way to really destroy your business, but it's what so many people do. Because on the one hand, they figure, I'm paying somebody to build this automation for me, it's going to work, and I don't need to touch it again. But that's the wrong approach, because inevitably things are going to break, technology is going to change, and you just need to be able to keep up with it. That's not the right approach to take. Automation is not set it and forget it. But if it's not set it and forget it, then what is it? Well, there's a much better approach to automation that you can take with your business. And instead of approaching automation as something that's to be set like once and then forgotten, just assuming that it's going to run on its own without you having any kind of human intervention whatsoever, it's better to have a more thoughtful approach and have something that's a lot more systematic, like actually having systems in place for automation. Just the same way that you have systems in place for like managing your money in your business, how you deliver your product to your clients, all that stuff is systematized, and your automation needs to be the same way. So instead of set it and forget it, what we need to do is set it and optimize it. That's the approach that I want you to take when it comes to automation, and hence the P.I.E automation flywheel framework. And that's what we're going to be looking at here, because setting it and optimizing it is the approach that I take. And this is what the P.I.E framework is all about. So let's jump into it. So the P.I.E flywheel automation framework is 3 steps. The first step is planning. The second step is implementation. And then finally, the third step is evaluation or evaluate. And then you just cycle through it, because you're not just going to plan and then implement. You need to then have the third step of evaluation, and then based on whatever the outcome of that evaluation is, then you might cycle back to step one, which is beginning to plan and do some other stuff. So let's break it down. Let's start with the first one. Step one, planning. Like Benjamin Franklin says, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So when it comes to planning in the P.I.E framework, it's going to require a multifaceted approach. You're not just doing one thing, because the planning stage is probably the most important step in this entire flywheel, because this is where all the hard work happens. And like it says here in the slides, it requires vision and imagination. One, because you need to know what you're going to automate. And if you don't know what you're going to automate, then this entire flywheel is pointless. And so it starts with that, knowing what you want to automate. But then once you do that, you need to then start taking some other steps. And this is the hardest step in the process, but I don't want it to scare you, because most people get overwhelmed with step one. But with this, step one, it seems more daunting than what it really is. And we're going to break it down a little bit more in the next lesson. I'm going to give you a framework for actually how to figure out what to automate, how to break things down, and figure out like what your plan of attack is. But that's for next time. So let's talk about the steps for actually planning. And I want to give you this quote from the Bible, Proverbs 21, chapter 21, verse 5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. And I think this is so true of automation, because so many people just want to get something up quick and then just let it run and do its thing. But you want to be diligent and systematic in your planning, because the better you're planning in the beginning, the less problems you're going to have in the end. It's only when you are rushing through the planning stage that problems begin to creep up, and then you want to know why, like everything isn't working, and then you just give up on automation altogether. That's the approach that most people take. But if you take your time in the beginning to plan well, then you're going to have everything that you need to then follow through on the subsequent steps of the flywheel. So the first step is deciding what to automate. And this is probably the easiest part of the process. So once you actually sit down, figure out what you need to automate, and again, in the next lesson, we're going to walk through the steps of how you actually figure out what to automate in your business. But once you decide that, then the fun begins. So once you do that, you then need to pick your metrics to track in order to determine what is success and what is failure for your automation. Because you don't just want to create an automation and then not know if it's working. You need to know, all right, I have this idea of what I want to build. So let's say you're building some kind of automation to bring in more leads. So you know the automation is working if you are bringing in X number of leads versus what you were bringing in before without the automation. Or if new leads aren't coming in, then there's something wrong with your automation, and you need to go in and then go to the evaluation page, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. So you need to have some metrics in place so that you can take a look in terms of having clear perspective of, all right, this is what I want this automation to do. These are the metrics this is the outcome that I want it to have. And these are the metrics that I'm going to track to make sure that's actually getting me the result that I want. Because if you don't have that, then again, you're not going to know how to evaluate your automation to know if it needs to be updated or changed or optimized. And then from there, you get to step 3. And step 3 is where the imagination and vision comes in. So you need to map out the automation. So let's say you are trying to figure out like what this automation is that you're trying to build. You've decided on what it is, and then you've picked your metrics for success. Now you actually need to sit down and plan out the steps for making that automation happen. So what's going to kick off this automation? Like what's your trigger going to be? And we'll talk more about this in part 4 when we start talking about the tools, and then in part 5 in creating the strategy. But mapping out the process from start to finish, like Here's what kicks off the automation, and then all the steps in between to get to the end result that you're looking for. That's all part of the planning phase, because you want to know exactly what's going to happen and what needs to happen in each individual step in order to get you to the end, because you can't just say, I want to start with this and end with this, and then just expect it to magically happen. You need to figure out like what all the steps are in between. And then finally, once you know what those steps are, you can plan and figure out what the requirements and tools are. So are you going to be using Zapier? Are you going to be using like Sure Triggers? Are you going to be using High Level? And all that kind of stuff. You can figure all that out after you know your plan of attack and you've mapped out your automation and what you want to happen. So that's the planning step. On to step 2. So step 2 of the P.I.E Flywheel Framework is implementation. And I really like this quote from John Gruber. He says, I don't consider ideas for apps all that valuable. It's the implementation of an idea that matters. And that is so true. You can do all the planning in step 1, but it's absolutely meaningless if you don't then implement it and put it into action. So I can't tell you the number of times I've sat down, and not even just talking about like automation, just in life in general. The number of times I've sat down, created a full plan for something, dreaming up like this great business idea of something I wanted to do, but then I never execute it. And so that dream just dies right there because I never took the first step to begin putting that into action. And that's the same thing here with automation. Once you have your plan, you need to implement it. But this is the most straightforward part, because of all the steps in the P.I.E automation flywheel, this one's the most straightforward. Like once your plan is in place, there's only one thing to do. Build it, and then once it's built, use it. Let it run. Let it do its thing. So that's all I have to say about this. That's all there is to implementation, because everything, all the hard work and heavy lifting was done in step 1. And then once you have your plan in place, it's just a matter of taking the plan that you put together, your automation framework, and then putting it into action, building each of those pieces. And whether that be doing it yourself or hiring someone to do it. And I'll talk more about that towards the end. But yeah, then we get to step 3. Step 3 is the evaluation phase. And John Wooden has this great quote, and it's more about like self-reflection, but I also think it really works here as well. And he says, without proper self-evaluation, failure is inevitable. So the idea here being that we need to evaluate what we're doing. We need to self-evaluate our automations, because if we don't do that, then failure is going to be inevitable, because eventually something's going to break. Technology is going to change in some way. And if you don't keep up with those changes, then you're going to be in a world of hurt once that thing breaks and you don't know why it's broken or what you need to do to fix it. You're just left scrambling. And so here are the steps for evaluation. So the very first thing is determining ahead of time your timeline, or a predetermined period for like when you're going to evaluate any automation that you're doing. So this could be monthly, quarterly, like every year. It really just depends. And I would say, depending on what the automation is, you start off checking it more frequently. So like maybe once you get it started, you're checking it every week just to make sure that it's working and doing what it's supposed to. And then after everything's working the way that it's supposed to and nothing is breaking, then maybe you just check it once a month, and then from there once a quarter, and then every 6 months, and then once a year. You're just coming back to evaluate things. So after you have that predetermined period, you need to evaluate if your automation is working. So how do you know if your automation is working? Well, one, is it giving you the desired result? Is it like actually doing what you designed it to do? If it's not doing that, then you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to go back to step 1. And the next thing, are you hitting your desired metrics? So it could be working and doing what it was designed to do, but it's still not giving you the metrics that you desire. And if you're not hitting the metrics that you want, then you still got to go back, reevaluate, go back to step 1, reconfigure some things, and optimize it to figure out what's going on. Then the next question is, so if it is working, you are hitting your metrics, you still have to ask yourself the question, can I improve upon this? Like, are there ways that I can automate this even further or improve upon what I'm doing? Are there new tools out there that make this even easier? Like all that kind of stuff that you're looking for and trying to determine whether or not you need to make changes to your automation. If no, then perfect. Just let it keep running, doing its thing. You check in again at your next check-in interval, and you just let it keep running. But if yes, then this is where the flywheel comes into play, because then you're circling back to the planning stage and figuring out what can you do to optimize this, what can you do to change things to make it work even better than what it did before. And then from there, you're then going to the implementation phase, and then you're going back through the evaluation after your predetermined period, and you're going through the steps all over again. And like a perfect example of this is one of the YouTube videos I recorded not too long ago. It was a video on like automating your challenge or webinar in high level. And one of the things that I did is like in the beginning, for like all the emails that you're sending out, like the keep warm emails, and then after your challenge or webinar is done, all the follow-up emails in there. Like in the workflow, I had it set like setting the time and date and then waiting for that step before sending the email. And there was that setting of the date for every single email. And then I realized as soon as I finished recording that video, there's a better and easier way to do this, because every time I have to update this workflow for a new webinar that I want to run, like if I want to run the webinar again, I have to go in, however many emails I have to go in and change the date in each of those emails. But I don't want to have to do that every single time. So what if I only set the date one time at the very beginning of this workflow, and then based all my evaluations off that date, like how many days and hours before that date do I send this email? How many days and hours before do I send the next email? Or how many days and hours after do I send the follow-up email? And high level allows you to do that. And so I went in, recorded another video, like as soon as I was finished with that one, recorded this next video showing how I was able to improve upon that because I found a better way to do it. And that's exactly what this evaluation phase is all about. Like looking for ways that things can be improved to, one, give you more time, to give you more freedom, to give you more money in your business, and so that you're just not left with your feet wet when everything starts to fall apart and technology changes and there are new tools out there, or the tool that you're using is going away. So that's the whole point of the P.I.E flywheel, is having something that you can repeat and not just letting things just sit there and forgetting it. And so, like I said, remember, the whole point of this is not setting it and forgetting it. We want to make sure that we are setting it and then continually, repeatedly optimizing it. And if there are no optimizations that need to be made, then that's great. But we still want to continually evaluate it to make sure that there aren't optimizations that we can't do, that we can do in the future. So just want to keep that in mind. And then I want to leave you with this one automation guiding principle as we wrap up this video. So when it comes to automation and using this framework, there's one principle that you always need to keep in mind. And this is the one principle that guides every decision I make when it comes to building automations. Simplicity over complexity. I want things to be as simple as possible, because the more complexity you bring into any of your automations, the more room you have for error, the more room there is for something to break or for something to go wrong. So the fewer steps that you can put in there, the better, because then you can know if something is wrong, it's easier to troubleshoot where that problem might be coming into play, makes it easier to fix. Whereas if you have like something with like 50 different branches of logic going on, you have to go through every single piece of logic to make sure like everything's working the way you want to. And I mean, sometimes that is necessary for the automation that you're building, but even then that should be the simplest form of that particular automation. it shouldn't be any more complex than it needs to be. It should be as simple as possible. And if you need to break that automation up into several different automations to keep it simple, then that's what you should do. Because the simpler it is, the easier it's going to be for you to maintain it long term and years down the road. So again, just to kind of recap where we're going with this, we've already looked at what automation is. We've looked at the P.I.E automation flywheel framework and giving you just a broad overview of what things should look like in your business when it comes to automation. And in the next few videos, it's all about implementation. So I'm gonna help you identify what you need to automate in your business. I'm going to give you a framework and a worksheet for how to do that. Then I'm going to show you the tools that you can use for automation, and you'll be surprised how simple some of these tools are. And then there are some that are like very complex out there, but I'm going to show you the wide variety of what's out there. And then finally, we're going to start building our strategy for automation and putting it all together so that you can have something that's repeatable, usable in your business that you can start using as soon as you're done with this video series. So that's all I got for now. And I want to remind you to join the free community, because that's where you're going to be able to catch all the replays for this. That's where you can find all the discussion. If you have any questions about automation, if you have any questions about like the P.I.E framework and just need some clarification on things, the community is the best place to do that. So go to LaRosaJohnson.com, click the link for the free community in there, and go ahead and get signed up. And I look forward to engaging with you there. But until then, I'll see you next time. Peace.